Hello everyone, my name is Emma Sigliano, and today I will be presenting on the video Renewing Democracy in a Time of Environmental Crisis, and this was a lecture given by Dr. Rebecca Huntley through the Melbourne Sustainability Society Institute. So Dr. Rebecca Huntley, who is known for her research in social trends on the environment, has conducted a number of focus groups and surveys about society's views on the environment and how politics plays into their decision makings. And I'll be highlighting 4 of her main surveys. So studies have shown that from 2013 to 2016, acceptance rates as climate change being a major threat has increased from 52% to 62%, and continue to trend upwards since 2016. However, there's a discrepancy between what people say they want and how people vote in elections. This was shown in the recent 2019 election when the Labour Party lost despite its predicted win and the coalition returned to the government. In my presentation, I will outline some of the results of these studies and analyze the implications of public opinions on climate change and how these affect the environment. So the first study I'm going to look at is the study commissioned by the World Wildlife Fund Australia. And this looks at the attitudes people had towards a transition to renewable energy, specifically amongst Australians who didn't vote Labour or Green Party in the last election, but still remain concerned about environmental issues. The objective was to figure out why the Labour Party lost the last election, and they looked at the swing between 2016 and the 2019 election. And they found that in 2019, pro-environmental candidates received a little over 48% of the primary vote, and this was 1.6% worse than in the 2016 election. This is significant because the concern about the environment has increased during this time, yet the election results did not show it. The analysis also showed that a vote for pro-environmental candidates was worse in Queensland, which is the most regionalised state. In general, votes for pro-environmental candidates was low in rural and regional electorates. Overall, the pro-environment vote was low in poorer electorates, older voters, people who have more children per household than average, people with lower Year 10 completion rates, and people with lower tertiary education. And this is all very concerning for the Labour Party. This data highlights that the challenges of those involved in climate communications face because these groups are the ones who will be hit hardest during times of climate change. Overall, this signals failures to communicate ideas of climate change to the people who should care about it the most, because they will be the ones who are most affected. So another survey that Dr. Rebecca Huntley participated in was the ABC National Survey, Australia Talks. So 54,000 Australians completed a 500-question survey, and these questions range from topics such as drugs, alcohol, human health, the environment, and so on. This survey shows how different groups in Australia respond to ideas of climate change. 72% of responders to this survey said that climate change was the biggest threat to them personally, and they had a choice of over 18 different issues to choose from. The data shows a massive gap between left and right political voters when it comes to the environment. And while many people are concerned with climate change, they narrow their scope when voting based on things such as household debt and living cost, which trumps concern of the environment when they are voting. However, life will get more expensive due to climate change, so there's an opportunity to connect cost of living, standard of life, and way of life with climate change that needs to be better conveyed to people when they're voting. So another study that she participated in was the study on the Yale Program of Climate Change Communication, and there was a very similar study done in Australia in 2013. And what this did was conduct studies on public opinion and behavior around climate, and it grouped citizens into 6 segments that categorized them depending on their attitudes towards climate change and views about action. So the first group is the alarmed group, which was about 18% of participants, and these people are fully convinced of the reality and seriousness of climate change and are already taking individual, consumer, and political action to address it. The next group is the concern group, which is the largest, containing about 33% of participants. And these people are also convinced that global warming is a serious problem, but have not yet engaged with the issue personally. Then there is the cautious, following with disengaged, doubtful, and lastly, the dismissive group, which is about 7%. And these people are very convinced that climate change is not happening and actively involved in opponents of national efforts to reduce emissions. And unfortunately, oftentimes, these can be people in positions of political power. So it's really important to shift and engage the bottom four categories to the concerned and alarmed grouping. I also think it's important to drive the dismissive group out of political power and find ways to engage with them in the media, including even new forms such as social media. So I'm also going to talk about the focus groups done through the World Wildlife Fund that Dr. Rebecca Huntley participated in, and how some of these findings relate to how people view media, images, and messages about the environment. So this focus group was conducted with people in outer suburban Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne. And they recruited people with lower education, swinger voters who had not voted Labour or Green in the 2019 election, but still described themselves as concerned or somewhat concerned about the environment. Common findings across the group were that there was an acknowledgement about climate change, but they saw it as more of a future threat, not immediate and not personal. They also rarely talked about climate change in their daily lives. There was a strong belief that climate change was overplayed by the media and politicized, and they disliked climate change discussion, specifically because of its negative gloom and doom tone and inaccessible language, and oftentimes felt guilty and depressed when listening to these climate change messages. When they were given scientifically proven climate change timescales, they became agitated with the emergency-type language and messages that were tested on them. When it came to energy, it was overwhelmingly for renewable energy over coal, and they wanted affordability and reliability, but kept questioning how fast it should proceed and what that cost will be for society. They hated all messages about energy except when they were formed in a positive way. For example, how clever Australians can be front-runners in renewable energy and help generate jobs and address the rising cost of living pressures. A lot of people felt as though there was not much they could do about climate change, and many felt the repetitive messages of climate change in the media make them shut off. This concept was also addressed in our reading through the case study from O'Neill, and how climate change stories in the media inspire feelings of paralysis because people feel powerless. We also heard a similar study to this in our Media and the Environment lecture last week in week 10, and how images of the environment make people feel that they have feelings of salience, but this can also often undermine self-efficacy because people feel that there's nothing they can do about these environmental issues. So some of the implications with this focus group is that it's important to reframe the way people talk about climate change, get societies on board, and properly communicate issues within the climate. Ways we can do this in the media is to reframe climate change messages to be more solution-focused and positive, and also understand the values of the people that you are trying to convince. Do not fuel division and conflict, and relate solutions to climate change to sources of happiness and common concern. And also never assume that messages that will work for some people will work for all people. I'd like to tie all of this together by talking about democracy and the environment, which is a key point in Dr. Huntley's lecture. Democracy in governments is essential to dealing with climate change. Legislation plays a huge role in environmental issues getting addressed, and governments are more likely to take action when there is pressure put on them from societies. However, in order to do this, we need to shift people's mindset and get them to understand that climate change is an immediate threat. In addition, trust in governments, trust in climate science, and climate authorities are vitally important when trying to understand why people respond to climate change messages the way that they do. A big takeaway that Dr. Huntley points out from the 2019 election is that Australians are alienated from the system, and that there are many signs they don't listen to campaign messages and make decisions before campaigns even start. This is a bad sign for democracy and shows a lack of trust electorates have in politics. If trust can be rebuilt in the government and electorates take action and become more involved and well-informed, this can help relationships with environment and sustainability. Media can play a role in this by educating people and inspiring them to take action because the media really does help shape and influence how citizens make sense of and value the world. Thus, reporting on climate change and continuing to survey the public's opinion is vital for the success of environmental action. So, for me, I am an environmental science major, and I find that emergency type language has really worked for me, and I respond well to that, but I know it's not for everyone. So I'd really love to hear your thoughts and opinions on environmental issues. So, along with these discussion questions, I've also included a really short survey, should only take you a few minutes to fill out, to gauge how people in our class feel about the environment. This will all be anonymous, but I will publish the results of the survey later on so we can see as a class how we each view the environment. And thank you all so much for listening to my presentation. Bye.